So a little while ago I did a video called How to Win a Random Game of Chance, or something along those lines, and in it I was dealing cards at random from a shuffled deck but somehow continuing to win. Now on the video I gave loads of clues as to how it was being done, but I never fully explained exactly what the deal was, and I promised I'd do a follow-up video if there was enough interest, and that's what I'm going to do in this video. If you're interested in learning more about BetAngel, its tools and the opportunities they present, then why not visit betangel.com today and download a free trial. So before we go into the full explanation, I thought I would give you a bit of background on how it all came around. And when I was young, I became fascinated through my early forays in the football pools with probability and games of chance and so on and so forth. And I came across a game called Penny Ante, or Penny's Game as it's sometimes called, or you could call it either. But basically it was a game where you flip a coin, and then there's a sequence comes up, and then you win if a certain sequence occurs, and you lose if your opponent's sequence occurs. And it gave me an insight into an area of maths that I'd never really looked at, so I became quite fascinated by it. Now, at around the same time, I was learning to card count, and the thing about card counting is obviously you use a deck of cards, but also the thing that you learn is as the count rises and falls as you go through the deck. So as the deck comes towards its end, you know whether you've got a positive expectancy or not on that particular game of blackjack. Now, I thought, wouldn't it be fun to take Penny's Game and stick it onto cards? And I also thought, based upon my experience with card counting, that it would work much better because you're working with a limited set of variables, and as we get towards the end of the deck, it's probably going to be more favourable. So I thought it would be quite easy to be able to apply what I saw in this coin flipping game to a deck of cards, and that turned out to be pretty easy to do. Now the problem that I had was I had to try and figure out how advantageous that was. So I didn't use a formula of any sort. I basically just wrote a bit of code on my ZX Spectrum, or it could have been a ZX81 at that point, and got it to churn through all of the data to pump out some statistics. And to my absolute amazement, the chance of winning using the cards was much, much higher than I could have possibly imagined. And that's why I started playing the same game but with cards. And you can play many variations of it as well. So you don't have to play it strictly to the rules. If you jumble it up a bit and use a bit of showmanship, which I didn't do in the original video, then you can actually fool people and make it almost impossible for people to figure out exactly what's going on. Because if you deal a few random decks and you turn over a few cards at random and you use no trickery whatsoever, then you can do that quite often without significantly impacting your edge when you look at the numbers and how positive the game is. So anyway, enough of that for the moment. Let's go on and look at the explanation, and at the end of the video I'll give you the exact numbers, the percentage chance of you winning with each particular deck of cards and the hand that is drawn to you. So here's the deck of cards again. We've just shuffled these, and you can shuffle these as many times as you like. You don't have to concern yourself with however the cards are presented. It doesn't matter. And for a bit of showmanship, you can get the dog to pick a card, or random, you just throw in all sorts of, anything to throw people off the scent. But these are random cards. So if you take 3 of those cards, I'll show you how to respond to those sequences. We're doing this at random at the moment. So red, red, black. So I'll take those and I'll show you the sequence that would go up against that. So you draw red, red, black, and basically what I need to do is black, red, red. And in fact, those were the first 3 cards that came out. So this is working really well. So with this sequence, I go up against you on that sequence, and over the long term, I will win. So we'll bin those cards. So draw another 3. And after we do this, I'll explain the logic of how these decisions are being made. Okay, so that's a different set altogether. And my response to that would be red, red, black. And with a sleight of hand, that looks like I drew them straight off the bottom of the pack. But when we did the original video, I was quite deliberately choosing a certain sequence, and I didn't jumble it up, I didn't randomize it, and the idea was to give people an idea and to make everybody out there in YouTube land think about exactly what I was doing and watch the video repeatedly and come up with sequence. So all I'm doing is repeating that sequence here effectively. But what we need to do now is to go on and explain exactly what the pattern is. So it took me ages to work it out, and the problem that I had was I couldn't necessarily particularly work out or explain the maths that went behind it when I first did it. I discovered how to do it and then figured out that somebody else had worked it out sort of like 400 years ago, which is always the case with math. You discover something brand new and then you suddenly think, you know, that some guy with a grey beard thought about it for most of his life and solved it, and now it's on YouTube. So if we take another 3 cards here, and I'll explain how to simplify it. There are 2 methods that it's really important to understand, or there are 3 elements to doing this that it's important to understand. And it's really important that you watch the whole of the video so that you can understand what's going on. And also, if you ever play this for money, which is slightly immoral because you know you're going to win, but that's never stopped me. But yeah, if you ever play it for money, it's important to understand the percentages, which we will describe at some point. So it's not good enough to know that it works. You need to know how well it works, depending upon what's in front of you. So when I look at this set of cards here, I can see that you've chosen red, red, black. So the sequence that I'm going to go up against here is black, red, red. So what I'm effectively doing is I'm looking at your second card, and then I'm picking, let's see if we can pick a black here, the opposite to your second card. So in my head, and thinking logically, I'm thinking not 2. So I'm thinking the opposite of not 2. So not 2 on this occasion, you've drawn red for your second card. I'm not fussed about the first card, that can disappear. It'll come into play in a second. But I'm choosing the opposite of what that second card is. And then I just copy the sequence of the first 2. So effectively what I'm doing is just looking at that card, doing the opposite there, and then copying your first 2. Because what that will allow me to do, there we go, that was a nice coincidence, is it will allow me to jump in front of that particular sequence of cards. Now, all of these cards here are completely random. They've been shuffled completely randomly. So that still doesn't really explain exactly what's going on. We need to explain that in greater depth. But before we do that, let's take another set of cards. If we do black, red, black, then the sequence that we'll have to follow will be a black, followed by another black, followed by a red. So every time you do it, you're basically doing the opposite of the second card and then the first 2 that your opponent has drawn. And again, if you want to fool other people, you can draw some of these randomly. So this sequence here is a little bit harder to win against. So if you draw randomly against that, people won't really notice. Where people tend to notice is if you keep repeating the same pattern here, and then you go black, red, red. So in fact, when you have jumbled up cards, if you really want to fool somebody, when the cards are jumbled up, you can play your normal hand, but when they do a sequence, which is where it becomes really obvious what you're doing, then you just mess it up deliberately. And you'll probably lose that hand, but they'll have no idea what's going on. And in fact, you could just draw the first few cards randomly, and you may end up with something like that. Or maybe even do that deliberately, because then they go, aha! So, but the basic sequence is whatever that middle card is, you do the opposite on the first, and then you basically follow up with number 1, 2. So the way I remember the whole sequence, that there's a whole table that you could look at on each one of these different combinations, but the way I remember it is not 2, 1, 2. So not 2, 1, 2, and that's a really simple way to remember the trick. So now we have an entire deck of 52 cards in front of us. They're all laid face up, so you can see the sequence that is occurring at any one point. We're going to work from left to right as we go across each of these and on our way down to the bottom, and we're going to examine what we see. Now this has been shuffled randomly, it's been dealt randomly, and you know, it makes no difference to us how that occurs. Absolutely no difference to us at all. So if we use one of the examples that we've just done on just 3 cards, we can examine the impact of how things play out. So if you chose red, 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 what we're going to do is going to use a red chip to mark where you would have won on that particular sequence. So if we start at the top, we'll have a look across here, we're looking for red, 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 and there's the first one. So you get off to a good start, and I'll put it at the end of the sequence so we can see red, 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 boom. You can see that you would have won that particular sequence there. So if you go across here, bearing in mind you're going to switch rows, where's the next red, red, red?
There.
Yeah. Okay, so you won 2 now. Good result, and we're looking for the next one.
There.
There.
Oh. And then starting from here.
Yeah, you have to start from there.
Here.
Yep.
And that's it.
Boom. So you didn't do too bad. You won 4 times on that particular sequence. So what we're looking at here from a mathematical perspective is a thing called waiting time. How long do we have to wait for that pattern, that sequence to occur? So one of the things that I've noticed, especially in gambling markets, is that people consistently confuse the underlying probability of something happening with a sequence of events. So, for example, Spurs have drawn the last 3 at home, and therefore people think, for some reason, that it's more or less likely because of that pattern of behaviour. But in fact, it's the underlying thing that you're interested in. So we know that there are 26 red and 26 black here, and there's nothing we can do to influence that. So we're not actually looking at that. It is random. It's completely random. What we're looking at is the time that it takes for one of those for those patterns to occur. It's the waiting time between patterns. So, I mean, this is completely coincidental because we did this at random, but can you see they're sort of reasonably evenly spaced?
Yeah.
We've got 2 on this row, 1 on the bottom, 1 on the top, but they're actually reasonably equidistant. They're not that radically different from 2. So I'm going to use the green ones to pick out, whoops, to randomly throw on the table, to pick out where my sequence would have won. So if you would have drawn red, 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 I would have gone black, red, red. So let's see how many times that sequence wins. So if we go along here and we're looking for black, red, red, black, red, red, there I am. So we'll go along here again. Top right hand corner here, you can see, actually you can put that on there for me because you're nearer. It goes black, red, red, yeah, it does, yeah. Oh yeah, so yeah. As you can see, it takes a bit of explaining. And then we're looking for another black, red, red sequence. So can you see the next one? So yeah, black, red, red, straight away, straight afterwards we see one. Then we're looking for black, red, red again, black, red, red, again. And then down here we're looking for black, red, red, black, red, black, red, black, red. Yep, black, red, red. So there's another one there.
And that's all.
And then that's it. So in fact, how many have I won on that particular sequence? I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it's pretty even. If we played this game continuously and we put another deck down, which would take far too long, then we would end up pretty much even overall. And you would win as many times as I do, but that's not the game we're playing. The game we're playing is which sequence occurs first. What's the average waiting time between those sequences? So I've got some black chips here to demonstrate exactly how that works. But you can see already what's going on. Can you see how every time you get a winning hand, I'm always 1 in front of you? So here you can actually see that I'm 1 in front of you because I've drawn black, red, red, and in fact you needed 3 reds. Mm-hmm. So before you got the chance to get that occurred. And then you can also see the same occurring here. I got 1 on its own here, and the sequence occurs all the way. So in fact, when we actually played this game, you wouldn't have won a single hand, despite the fact that it's random and you won as many as I did. Because I changed that first card, we ended up completely distorting the overall results.
So what we're actually looking at here is an overlap. So can you see here, you've got red, 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 but you've also got red, red, red here. But because we've forced the winning hand to be on that particular sequence, can you see where the overlap occurs, I win. If we go down to here, we can see that you've got red, 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 but the first occasion I've jumped in front of you anyway, and it doesn't matter about the next card because I've won anyway. Here, can you see there's another overlap? So this is where it's all going wrong for you, because sequences of threes are occurring, but by changing that first card, I'm able to nip in front of you, especially where an overlap occurs. And if we look down here, there's 3, but there's no particular overlap. So wherever an overlap occurs of your particular cards, especially on that hand, you're doomed, basically. But also, even if you do get a decent hand, because I've changed the colour of that first card, which is your second card, I stop the sequence before you get to it. So the interesting thing about this is you can prove that it's entirely random, that the deck's random, and you can also prove that the results are random, because I got 5 and you got 4 on this occasion. It could have been that you got 5 and I got 4, but it doesn't matter anyway, because I'm going to beat you on each one of these hands. Now the curious thing about this is this will work on a number of different hands, but with different levels of probability. So if you drew black, 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 or red, 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 I'm almost certainly going to win that. But other sequences are a little bit more complicated. However, I've done the work on that. So if you want to know the exact percentages, I'll bring those up just after we've done and finished this explanation.
So as I said at the beginning of the video, one of the things I was keen to find out was just how big my edge was within this particular game using cards. And it's funny, and I'm sure other people will relate to this, but very often if you start digging around with statistics and you discover something, you nearly always find that somebody has discovered it before you. Not always, but very often you can. And it's the same with this particular scenario, with all of the stuff that I found out here. I spent ages figuring out how to do it and coming up with a really simple method and process of remembering how to do this particular game. And I then went off and started doing simulations on it to just figure out how much edge I had over other people, and it was astonishingly good, which is why I like playing this game, especially when you're at a party or something. You can fool people into believing it's random when in fact it's nothing like that. And in fact it's much, much, much more positive than you could ever possibly imagine. So if you go on to Wikipedia, you can find some of the entries relating to this, which is where I've taken these numbers from. I'm assuming they will be more accurate than the stuff I did 30 years ago or whatever. But basically, if your opponent draws a straight run of colours, so it's black, black, black or red, 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 then your chance of winning is 95%. It's absolutely huge. And this is why I said you can jumble things up, randomize stuff a little bit, and still have an absolutely massive edge, because your edge is so big that you can actually play randomly for a period before deciding to go in for the kill. However, if your hand or your opponent's hand is a palindrome, in other words it goes red, black, red or black, red, black, then your percentage drops. So that's the worst hand that can be dealt against you, is the palindrome, and that will reduce your winning percentage to about 80%, but it's still huge. You've still got an absolutely massive margin there. And it is possible to draw the game as well, but that's pretty rare, to be honest. But yeah, basically your edge is massive. So if you want to play this game really smart, on the original video what I did do was I played it in its purest form without trying to fool you. So hopefully a few of you would have been able to see the sequence and the pattern that I was using. But when you play it properly and you want to do it to impress people, then you can mix up randomness with your cards, because if you know you've got a 95% chance of winning a hand, then you can play a few random hands and then go and switch to the strategy and just jumble things up repeatedly, and that will completely and utterly confuse people. But anyhow, what you should do is, if I go here and I sort of point down, this is the actual sequence of cards. So on one side you've got the cards that your opponent draws, the cards that you should put up against them, and I've explained how to do that already. And then you can see the winning percentages running along the bottom. So in fact you can see that it's a very, very positive game, and despite the fact that you can see that it's random and that the game is random and drawn at random, you can see how by changing that first card and altering where we position ourselves on that sequence, that actually gives us an absolutely massive edge over our opponent. But also it explains why a lot of statistics are pretty useless. So you very often see, especially with football teams, they're saying, oh, this team has done this, and they've done 3 in a row, or they haven't won for 5 games, or they haven't drawn, or they haven't scored a goal, or there hasn't been a goal in this period. And all they're doing is they're interpreting it incorrectly, or they're not looking at it the correct way. But also think about it, if you went and had a bet with somebody on a sequence of football matches saying, you know, I bet the following is going to happen, you could actually tweak your position as long as they place their bet first, or their wager first in front of you, to exploit whatever they've done. So bear that in mind as well. But certainly in terms of the difference between the probability of something happening and a sequence of events, it's important to understand and differentiate the difference between the two, because saying that a certain sequence is going to occur is not the same as saying that you've changed the probability, but the underlying probability of the event in this case is going to be 50-50, but the outcome of the game will be radically influenced by the way in which we play it.